The internet is the great connector and it always will be, but there's no connection like in-person, interaction and not even just in person, but just interacting with people in general. Hello and welcome to another episode of Wax Talk with Raw Mints. I'm Carlos.
And I'm Bruce.
And on today's episode, we're going to be talking to you about the card show approach and the local card shop approach, LCS. We're going to be talking to you about how valuable it is within the hobby, how much love that we have for those experiences in general, and how it's such a huge part of the hobby and some of the best part of what the hobby is. But before we get into it, as always, if you could just please be sure to subscribe and like if you haven't already. Share with somebody you might know that might be interested in learning about the hobby, or somebody that might just want to just hear about sports cards or something new or fun to talk about. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Raw Mints. We post daily content about the hobby. We do market research. We share pop reports, we share our experiences, as well as showcase our PC. So be sure to check that out, give us a follow there. And we also want to say thank you for listening and continuing to listen week after week. It really does mean a lot to us. We really enjoy doing this, and we hope that you enjoy listening to it. So without further ado, let's get into it, man.
Yeah, so the topic of the topic of today, particularly talking about sports card shows and sports card shops. These are just some of our favorite things. How you and I, Carlos, got engaged in cards together was at a card show. Even though you were coming to a card show I was setting up at, and you were coming there with your laptop to do work. Here and there, you would see the interactions I was making with people, not even in selling, but just talking to people about, players and teams. And you were able to gravitate towards that. I feel like that's another thing that has boosted your love for the hobby, for sports cards, for getting more into sports than you were before. With sports card shops, or some people say they're LCS, their local card shop, these are important things to discuss because you build relationships with the shop owners. A lot of the ones that we know in Arizona have been owning shops for 10, 20 years, so on. With the way things are in the hobby, you see it boosting card shops, card shows. But at the same time, at the end of the day, if cards go back to normal price, it's important to visit your LCS and build relationships with the people there that work there, the people that come in there. A lot of the times you go into card shops, you'll see people opening boxes or packs. I think that's another exciting thing, especially if you're not trying to spend a lot of money on national treasures. You may see somebody walk in there like I did a while back and opened up a couple boxes of National Treasures, a product that I wouldn't be able to ever consider paying for. They're thousands of dollars or whatever, but those kind of interactions that you see in card shops and card shows are just kind of what helps you to figure out what you're trying to pick up when it comes to cards, and just learning market value, seeing what, getting tips from other sellers, buyers, traders, whoever. But just the importance of it outside of just being stuck to your computer and just seeing cards all day. You can look at cards on eBay all day and you can learn a lot about, anything you want on the internet, which is cool. But just the in-person interaction in general at shows and shops, I think, is important. As far as right now where you're at, Carlos, I know things with COVID have been different as far as card shows and going into card shops and rummaging through cards and stuff like that. But what has been your favorite way to just look at cards in person, at least?
I really enjoy interacting at card shows. Shout out to Showtime Sports Cards for the LCS. Shout out to Hot Corner, Phoenix Sports Cards. Those are some of our sports card shops, or LCSs, that we frequent and we are patrons to. I know you've been going to Pete's since you were a kid. I know your grandpa was taking you there growing up, which is freaking awesome.
Peter at Showtime, even now it's, an hour and 20 minutes or maybe hour and 30 minutes from where I'm at now, but I'll still, if I'm going to go to the valley and hit up a card shop, most of the time it's gonna be Showtime for sure. That's been my go-to for a while, you know. And there are some other great shops in Arizona as well. I've just known Peter for a long time, so it's good to go in there and talk the hobby with him, and where he, you know, he's been doing it so long that it's cool to hear that for sure. That's like an OG just telling you how the market was, where it's at now, where they think it'll be. I mean, it's good to hear that knowledge as well and share your thoughts. You know, I think that's also a really fun experience.
But just to go back to that, my interest and my passion for the hobby all started from watching you wheel and deal at local card shows. Shout out to Cole Collectibles on College. I would go to those shows and interact, not only obviously with you because we're friends, but I'd interact with the people that you would make deals with and just talk to other people and just talk sports, you know, talk shop. And their knowledge of sports, it definitely translates to knowledge of the hobby and sports cards and who they pick up. And that's one of the aspects of the hobby that I really gravitated towards, is talking to people, meeting new people. I'm an outgoing person. I like to meet new people. I like to make new friends, and I really enjoy, meeting people that have similar interests. So when joining the hobby and, you know, becoming a collector, becoming a seller, a buyer, or an investor, and joining the hobby, that's definitely one of the best aspects, I think, is that in-person interaction.
Yeah, one thing I've always done, and Cole would always let me do it at his shows, but like, if I could encourage any of my friends to like, hey, do you have cards? Put them out on the table with me, you know, hang out at the card show, be like a dealer. If somebody's interested in the cards, they can ask you, you know, so you got to experience that as well. And it helps you to talk to people and make those interactions as well. Going into a show as a buyer is also really cool. You take advantage of deals. But I feel like personally, like being able to be a dealer at a show, if you have the time, and it's definitely worth it. One of the biggest things I feel like with you first watching me though, you saw how hard it was for me because I'm a collector. So like somebody wants a card and they make me an offer and you're like, why aren't you selling that? I'm like, I like this card.
Right.
And this is even before, you know, before the market explosion. This
Right.
is just like, you know, not wanting to let go of certain cards just for sentimental value or whatever.
Sure.
But it's fun, you know. That's why I always love trading. I like trading towards cards, even bigger cards, you know. I might have 2 cards someone's interested in, they bring cards, and I trade those 2 individual cards for something bigger. So that's kind of like a fun thing for me is with the card show approach, is you have that advantage as a dealer, but you could also work in deals. For me, I'm hoping that people are walking in with cards to trade or sell or whatever.
And you never know what people have or what people collect in their PC. It can be something that you collect personally, but it's not a popular player or a popular card to collect. And you could run into a fellow collector that values those cards just as much as you do. It's so interesting to me, the diversity of the hobby.
Yeah, you never know. And most people could come in. I mean, you would think that most people come in with stuff that is considered trade bait to them, or stuff that they just want to move into, stuff that they like that isn't PC. A lot of people won't really bring all their like best cards, you know what I mean? Unless, I don't know, sometimes it's nice to just carry those cards around with you, I guess. But, you know, a lot of people won't bring those big PC cards, but at the same time, what they don't collect, you may be interested in it or collect. So you really never know what somebody's going to walk in with.
And that social aspect of it, really, just talking cards and figuring out who they PC and who they're fans of, or what teams or sports they collect. That's the fun that comes along with that in-person interaction.
Yeah, you want everybody to feel like they're winning. You know, that's how it should be. There's a lot of great, with card shows and stuff, a lot of great YouTube pages where people do card shows. And there's a lot of really positive people just trying to showcase cards for people and, you know, make deals and interact with people. And it's important, I think, on a positive note.
And it's very different from buying and selling cards on eBay. You don't get that type of interaction. You don't get that type of personal one-on-one, you know, interaction, which by all means, I do pick up a lot of cards on eBay, and it's whatever, you know, I just try to find the best deal possible because it's not really a one-on-one interaction. It's just straight to business, you know, it's strictly business.
Yeah, it's easy. It's a lot more convenient, you know.
That's what I love about the in-person interaction. But I've also, I mean, that doesn't say that that's not It's not to say that that can't happen on eBay, because we've found a lot of really cool people on eBay that are fellow collectors, and they've even reached out saying, "Hey, we saw your raw mints page, and we wanted to make a deal with you." Or if we pick up maybe multiples of a certain player, whether it's raw or graded cards, some people might reach out and say, "Hey, I have a few of these other cards, that I haven't listed or that I haven't put up on eBay yet. Would you be interested?" And you'd be surprised how many deals that you didn't know that you could make when people reach out like that and you respond. And I've had multiple interactions where I was looking for a certain player or a certain slab, and they were hard to find, and come to find out there's people that pretty much own the whole pop. And I know we're that for some people too, especially when it comes to the soccer cards, the cards that we've gotten graded. We own a lot of the population of those cards in existence.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of cool to know that if somebody reaches out, or if you reach out and say, "Hey, do you happen to have any more of this player or any more of this card?" And people will be honest and say no, or sometimes they might say yeah. And like you said before, the point you made before is like they could have a lot of cards that they don't personally hold on to or collect, like you said, trade bait. But these could be players or cards that we're looking for. And it's just kind of a win-win, dude. That's why I love that interaction so much, because you can learn more about what people collect and what other people are into, and learn more about different products and different cards. That's what got me so hooked almost instantly, is hearing all of these people's feedback on their favorite products or their favorite players. And it just kind of piqued my interest in, oh, well, I like that player or that team too. Like, which cards do you like? Which are your favorite designs? And it just all just kind of snowballs into a positive interaction with people. It's awesome.
Yeah, it should be a good interaction too. If you're going to a card show as a buyer, a lot of dealers, I mean, first of all, if you're strictly focusing on eBay value and what's selling, most players will at least try to match comps or go below it and save you, the fees and everything, which is kind of where the market is at. But there's also a span of dealers who, still go by Beckett, and they'll treat you fair based on, especially with raw cards. And they just kind of grade it based off of near mint to mint or mint, whatever they think it may be, and try to price it accordingly. But one of the best things, my favorite things, if you have the time, if you go to card shows, or maybe some card shops have them, but dollar boxes, $5 boxes, just things that are even in penny sleeves or top loaders. I mean, if you can spend the time to go through that, you might be finding some key rookies, some stuff that maybe a dealer has just had in that box that they don't even really know about. Just stuff that you might be able to take advantage of as far as picking up cool key cards in general, and then maybe buying cards in bulk, getting a better discount on it. I mean, these are ways to enjoy card shows as well, or card shops, is just being able to browse through singles. It always sucks if you go to a card shop and they have no cards there in showcases, or it's just that's the cards that stay there for years and years in the same showcase. Like, to be able to go somewhere and see singles and pick what you really want in person, and especially if it's not graded, you can go through the condition and look at it, and get a better value that way. I just feel like there's more of an advantage overall.
You're so right. And when it comes to going through boxes or crate digging at card shops, that doesn't cost you any money to to look through boxes. It's a lot more affordable than buying hobby boxes or retail boxes at the card shops, because you know exactly what you're looking for. And if you don't find anything, you didn't spend any money by just taking the time to go through boxes. Yeah, it's time consuming, but me personally, dude, on my days off sometimes, I'll just go through, I'll go to card shops and just go through their boxes to see what they have. And I've found some really good cards, some cards that I got graded and they jammed. There's gold everywhere to be found. You don't have to just spend thousands of dollars on sealed product and not get anything. Like, you're most likely not going to get some one of ones or autos or really nice parallels in those boxes when you're digging through them, because if they're in those boxes, usually they've been picked through already. But if there's players that you like, or if there's players that you think are good or prospects that you think are good, going through those boxes and taking the time, it's not only fun because you're hunting per se, but just throw on some music in your AirPods and dig for a few hours. I love doing that. It's like really kind of calming and it's exciting at the same time, but it's something that you don't really get the chance to do on eBay because that's so time consuming to list every single card in a box. That's an aspect of the hobby that I really enjoy, of that in-person touch.
Yeah, so the biggest thing I feel like is just doing some research on looking for card shows, card shops. Obviously, because it's so hard to go to retail stores, and if we were doing this podcast like a few years ago, then we would be saying like just go to Walmart and pick up a blaster or something, and just go from there, get into the hobby that way. But everybody knows about the scary part of the hobby right now and how crazy it is. But I mean, just encouraging people to do the research as far as looking into if you have any card shops near you and just going there, especially if you're new to the hobby. The people that work there, I mean, they're not always just trying to sell you a product. You'll be able to get that vibe if they really engage and ask what you're interested in and explain products. Most shops, at least what we're used to, they'll really try to go over what their thoughts are on particular products. But with card shows, I mean, you can find ways to look in the area. Biggest thing is looking on YouTube. I mean, there's a lot of great YouTubers that do videos and they just do vlogs on card shows, which I think is a lot of people are into right now. And it's exciting, because a lot of people can't travel or it's just a different time right now. But it's cool to see it still happening and maybe build your interest in trying to check out a card show, whether it's in your state or, some of the other ones like in Dallas or Florida. I think they have the shows and the Nationals coming up as well, which I know is going to be huge. There's going to be some crazy cards there. But looking into over these approaching months, especially with the National, if you're on the fence about getting into a card show, whether you're going as a buyer or you want to set up a table, check out some YouTube videos, especially with the National approaching. There'll be a lot of people doing those shows. And like I said, with the Dallas show, Miami, there's a courtside show, I believe, that happens every month or every other month. I mean, just to get a feel for what's out there, it's kind of cool.
And just kind of go prepared. Be prepared if you are a seller. Be prepared to make deals. Don't be shy, like just get a feel for the vibe and fill it out. But just be prepared if you have big cards that you are wanting to sell or trade, just know your values, know your trade values ahead of time if possible. If you have boxes of slabs, it's going to be so time consuming. It's just going to not be fun to look up every value. But if you've got like a handful of cards that you're looking to move at card shows as a seller, just know your prices. Know, the lowest you'll possibly go if you're just selling them single, or, the deals that you could offer somebody if you combine a few cards to make the deal happen. Just kind of know your values of the cards that you ultimately want to push. And as a buyer, do the same. It's it's very common for people to just look at your cards that you have out on the table and then just go to their phone and check eBay. I mean, we're guilty of that as well, just to know, usually if we're overpaying or if it's a good deal, you have to be smart with your money, especially these days, to, protect your investments. But if you're going to one of these big shows, or if you're going to a small show, don't be on your phone the entire time enjoy the other aspects of the show itself. Interact with people, talk to people.
Yeah, you see some great cards as well. The biggest thing is if you're going as a buyer, hopefully you have some cards to bring as trade bait in case a dealer has some cards in a showcase that you want. Maybe you can trade a card for card or trade up for that card. But try not to bring cards that you're really sentimentally attached to for whatever reason. Leave those cards at home. Because then it just puts a different perspective if the dealer's interested in that and you don't really want to move it. Being as a dealer, like as I've set up at shows, I put cards out on a showcase I don't want to sell. I'm guilty of that as well. And a lot of dealers will put not for sale or whatever just because they want to showcase it, which is fine as well. But going as a buyer, it's kind of a different thing, because if you're bringing cards that you don't want to get rid of, it's kind of like you shouldn't bring them at all. It's the way that most dealers will look at it, especially if they're interested in that card.
If you want to showcase your cards, then get a table and have a little section that's not for sale because there's a lot of people out there that I mean, I'm a fan of just admiring cards or admiring rare cards that people have that aren't for sale, or that they do have for sale and it's just out of my budget. I like holding it and seeing it for myself. It's cool when you get to see something super rare or something you don't see every day. But I mean, if that's your approach as a buyer, like you said, don't bring those cards if you're not going to move them. If you really want to showcase your cards, just get a table and showcase them that way.
And then you get the best of both worlds that way. But yeah, just do research as far as looking into it if you have interest, because I mean, bottom line is it shouldn't be everything is just what you learn about cards is what's going in auction or market value that way. I mean, the internet is like your main source for everything. That's understandable, but at the same time, I mean, just these, if card shows and card shops just disappear, I mean, the hobby to me has faded away in a drastic way. So it's important for me to encourage people to try to visit card shops at least and just support these businesses.
Right, because I mean, they're local businesses. Most card shops, in my opinion, are just local. They're not big players. I don't think there's really a major chain of card shops at all. I mean, if Blowout had shops, but they just do all their business online, like even Steel City Collectibles and, Card Collector 2, those big players, Nash Cards, like,
yeah, RBI Crew,
yeah, they're local dudes. Like, they're not part of any sort of chain per se. Like, yeah, Steel City and Blowout are big, sellers and big shareholders of the market, but if they have a card shop, they usually only have one location, so they're still all locally owned, family owned places. Like, support these businesses. That's really something important to value in this country, and wherever you're at. If you do have an LCS, to support them, because you want them to be around, because if they're not around, like you said, the hobby will fade away.
Yeah, and it's easy to say that hobby boxes are too expensive to buy. I mean, everybody knows that, and I think card shops are doing okay with that. But at the same time, I mean, they're at a disadvantage because they're not getting as much of the supply that they need, and it's like the money that they're making on it isn't anything like it was before. It's just kind of like it's just a different era right now. Most card shops, I feel like, will at least try to be fair on their prices, or to try to be at least a little bit under, especially another thing too is when a product first drops, it's either going to be really, really high or it's going to be a little bit low. So those are some things to know, especially I noticed that with hockey. I guess that's one of the only affordable products that I'm picking up right now as far as Upper Deck hobby boxes is they're under $200, and that could change. But, hockey seems to be pretty fairly priced for the most part.
So this week's Ask the Hobby question of the week, we posed to a fellow collector, 20 years in the hobby, Vintage House Slabs, VHS Slabs. That's vintage_house_slabs on Instagram. It's in their title. Their slabs are so sick. Dude's got a super sick Kobe collection. Anytime I go to his page, I just in awe, because it's like, dude, I want that to be my Kobe collection. But he's a really cool dude, really knowledgeable, really respected within the hobby, and we definitely have respect for what they do as well. So our question that we had for him was, as a very diverse collector in the hobby and the experience you've had in your time, in the past 20 years, how do you see the more recent push for graded vintage slabs and for vintage cards getting graded affecting the value of more modern or ultra-modern cards? Do you feel both eras will operate separately, or do you see vintage becoming more popular than ultra-modern cards? And this was his response.
Hey, Romance, this is John Byer from Vintage House Slabs. Appreciate you guys having me on. And I think you're going to be able to ask that question now. You could have asked that question 10, 15 years ago, and you're going to be able to ask that question 5, 10, 15 years from now. Because the fun thing about the hobby is, as long as people are into it, and as long as, especially we keep getting like this youth movement into the hobby, there's always going to be new collectors, and there's always going to be ultra modern. And what's ultra modern today will be modern soon, and then eventually that'll turn to vintage, right? And some of these prospects and up and coming stars will have one of a few things happen. They'll either fizzle out and no one will ever hear from some of these guys again. There'll be quality players in their leagues, but not Hall of Famers, which is fine. Or they will become the next GOATs, right? And they'll become Hall of Famers, and they'll become staples of some people's collections. And that's always going to happen. So I think, when you look at it, a collector that was coming up in the late 80s, early 90s, if that person had a bunch of Mickey Mantles and Roberto Clementes and Julius Ervings and all of those GOATs, they probably didn't think that a 92 Shaq Bean team would be a staple of their collection one day. They probably didn't think that a Jordan Fleer Ultra Scoring Kings would be a staple. But now when you look back, I hear people refer to those cards almost as vintage, right? Like on the cusp of older modern or kind of newer vintage. And you're always going to have that. You're always going to have that. And I was talking to somebody recently about the problem with graded cards. And they were saying, the problem is that everyone's getting all of these base Prism rookies graded, and they probably shouldn't. And I said, I agree with them. I think they're right. But at the same time, if the grading companies, PSA, Beckett and SGC, were really around in the early 90s, and I know they were around, but they weren't the standard, right? So back in the early 90s, when these companies were just getting started, you only graded cards if it was a super rare card or a card that was possibly faked a lot, just for authenticity purposes. But you didn't grade base cards back then. But if it was the standard, we would have been grading Harold Miner rookie cards all day long, and Cedric Ceballos and Tom Gugliotta. And you can literally go year by year and name all the players that didn't work out that people really thought had some big potential that would have been graded, right? We would have all of these slabs of Latrell Sprewell that people would just be using as coasters right now. It's just a different time. So I think both vintage and modern, ultra modern can all coexist. And I think there's always going to be the opportunity, especially for collectors, to dabble in all of those pools. Especially me, I focus mostly on vintage, mostly on Hall of Famers. But I've caught the bug a little bit. I've started to dabble a little bit in Prism and doing some more perspective and speculative buying, just because it's kind of fun. And if you look at some of the emerging platforms, like a Star Stock, it's kind of a combination of fantasy sports and stock market and gambling through trading cards. So it's not just the grading now, it's also just, how are people consuming and how are people buying. So, and literally I can talk about this all day long, but I think the vintage market is strong and will continue to be strong. And you'll see just kind of steadier growth and a little bit of a safer bet, obviously. And in the ultra modern, the modern, you're just going to see much more higher highs and lower lows depending on current player performance. But at the end of the day, I think both markets are still very strong and still have a very bright future. So I think they could definitely coexist. And then the question that I want to pose to your listeners and to you guys is, less about the buying and selling of cards. I think, everybody talks about the buying and selling. What I'm really interested in is, for everyone who has a really great personal collection, their great PC, whether it's a particular player, they collect a particular team, a decade, a sport, whatever it might be, a particular insert, or parallel. How are people displaying and how are people enjoying their cards? And, I think this is really more for the collectors, not the investors and the flippers, but for a collector that wants to proudly, just be with their cards, whether it's in their sports den or in their home office. I know there's some interesting things for wall displays that take up a lot of real estate. There's these boxes that you have to kind of lock them up, but you can't really enjoy them. Like, how are people displaying their cards, and do they wish there was a better alternative? What should the standard be? Really interested just to see some people's thoughts on that. So thanks so much for having me on, and all the best.
Yeah, I really enjoyed listening to that. This is somebody that you can tell is has been a collector for a long time. He's talking about vintage to modern. Everything he said with if grading was a thing back in the day, it all makes sense. So thank you for your thoughts on that whole thing. As we're getting older, especially, we're seeing things, and I've been collecting a long time. I'm seeing things that are being considered vintage, and I'm like, that's not vintage. But then I'm just like, I'm not old, but I'm getting older. So it's just one of those things that I'm kind of growing with, but there's always going to be that interest, just like I always keep saying, people just continue to go back farther and farther. Vintage is key, and as time goes on, yeah, you're going to have current players, you're going to have hot players, but over time, it's the more established ones that really stick out in history. But yeah, I mean, I enjoy hearing it as a collector, everything that he said. And I know it speaks to you, Carlos, because it's the same vibe that I've tried to share with you and that you've gotten since you've started collecting. So I know that all those points speak well to you. I mean, what stood out most about what he said?
I think what stood out most to me, and again, thank you for taking the time out of your day to respond. I think the thing that stood out the most to me was the fact that we not only are getting old, because those, he made a really good point of like the new vintage or old modern. That's really a nice way to put it. We've been trying to find a term to categorize that time period, and I think it's just us just trying to not be old. But I think the point that he made with, you could ask that same question 10, 15, 20 years ago, you can ask that question 10, 15, 20 years from now. Vintage is going to become vintage. It's like you said, today's modern and ultra modern will be vintage one day. And the stuff that the early 90s stuff that we like, that we really enjoyed, or you collected as a kid and I'm collecting now as an adult, it's getting closer to vintage as well. And I think what I took from that is kind of choose wisely and collect wisely. Like you said, if grading was as popular as it is now, back then, there would be a lot of these base cards or base players of people that never panned out. I mean, that's a really good point to make. So these players, there's a lot of prospecting and speculation that's happening currently. And I mean, I guess it has always happened, but at least today, the prospecting and speculation is getting graded. And so, it's kind of up to you as a collector. Like, are you collecting this prospect because you really like them, or you really like the team, or you don't care? Or are you investing? Are you rolling the dice on getting these cards graded?
And also, are you holding these cards? If you're getting graded cards and they're 9s and 10s, are you holding them until they someday become vintage? I mean, do you have enough faith in that player, that card? If you're focusing just on moving it and selling it right away, I mean, you may miss out on that opportunity. That's another way to look at it as well.
Right, and if you hold too long, it just might be, like you said, those Gugliatas, those players like he mentioned in
Latrell Sprewell. He was dropping some names for sure.
Yeah, dude, he definitely knew his stuff. But it's like, you just be aware if you are getting these cards graded, if you're spending the money, and again, we don't know how much that's going to cost once PSA opens back up on these base cards. If you're spending the money to get them graded, just know that, if you're thinking long term, you got to have a lot of faith in this player panning out if you're thinking of investing, because just go to eBay right now and search PSA slabs or BGS slabs or SGC slabs, and there's so many cards that are graded, even 10s and 9s, that you can pick up right now for $5-6 of players
cheaper than the cost of grading the card.
Right, exactly, of players from the 80s, 90s, even longer ago. That's like, if this card is from 1956 and it's still only worth $8 in a PSA 10, which, I mean, that would probably be hard to find. That's a bad example, but if it's a high grade, of like a really, really old card, like if it hasn't gone up too much then, like now, like it might not go up much more. So just kind of think long term when it comes to your PC, or not your PC, when it comes to investing, if that's the bag you want to be left holding. But if it's somebody that you really like, or it's just a team you really like, and you're just a PC, collector, then by all means, man, like do whatever you want to do. If it makes you happy, do it. To answer his question, I think it's a really good question. I think it's just based on preference. I'm working on, getting a house soon, and I want to be able to have like my own, my home office be a spot where I can have the podcast set up, just ready to go, and also be able to display some of my PC cards, in out, like not in direct sunlight, obviously. But I think that's a great idea, and we've spoke a little bit on IG about his ideas that he has for displaying cards, and when that idea comes to fruition, we're definitely going to be pumping that out. But he's got some cool ideas for how to display cards, and I think personally, when I do have the space, and when I do have the ability to display my cards, I definitely want to put out some of those Cavani Pop 1s, Pop 2s, those Mo Salah, serial number to 25s that I have, those PSA cards, and just kind of show my love, just be a reminder of like, oh yeah, like this is why I'm in the hobby, because I get to see these beautiful cards every day.
Other ways that we display our cards, I would say, with our page, with our Raw Mints page, directly
nice.
To everybody that wants to view.
Nice.
Everybody that wants to view. The photos of the cards, from Carlos, these are both of our cards, cards that we love, cards that we want to talk about, players, teams, kind of what we're continuing to do with the hobby. But that's one way that we like to display our cards. Another way is at card shows. Again, going back to this topic, is with card shows. What better way to display your cards than at shows, when you can put them in showcases or on a table? These are ultimate ways to display cards. Enjoy them, appreciate them, get other people to ask about them, and talk about the cards that you love. These are just also additional ways of displaying cards.
Nice tie-in. That's at Raw Mints on Instagram. That was good, dude. I didn't even think of that. That's a good idea.
But really, the biggest thing, those are two of the biggest things. But what you see on our page, thanks to Carlos's photography skills with the cards, we're trying to just showcase the card in itself, and our love for the card, the design, everything. That's what it is. That's our wax perspective.
But yes, great response. Great question. Really enjoyed that response a lot. I know there's a lot of collectors out there that are going to really, connect with that like we did. So thank you again to VHS Slabs. So let's get into our pickups and flips of the week, man. I'll just get right into mine. My pickup of the week, we spoke about this prior. I'm really into that UFC Prism right now. I really enjoy the parallels. And my favorite fighter currently is Israel Adesanya, the last style bender. Izzy. I picked up a 2021 Panini UFC Prism debut, Israel Adesanya, a red Prism numbered to 275. The photo on it, if you look it up, is nasty. It's him, before his fights, kind of like a Anderson Silva ish pose, where he's got his hands on the cage and he's like crouched. It's super sick. I think the photography is insane on these Prism cards. But yeah, that's my pickup of the week. I picked it up for $81. It might be overpriced, but it might not. Once he wins his next match and retains the belt, it could double, it could go up more. I don't care. I'm setting out for grading, so even if his career were to take a turn for the worst by the time I get it back from PSA, I don't care. That's why I collect it, because I really like the dude. I like his attitude, and that'd be a really cool card to get graded regardless. What about you?
Yeah, it's a cool pickup for sure, man. It's all about picking up what you like, and just hoping to get it graded and just hold it regardless. That's what it's about. My pickup is going to be a 2001 Topps LaDainian Tomlinson PSA 9. This is the collection parallel. So essentially, for people that know this card or this set, which has also Drew Brees, Michael Vick, a few other people in it. It's the same exact card, except there's a gold stamp on it that says Topps Collection. As far as value goes, I would say it has a multiplier of maybe 1.5 of the base card, maybe even say 1.2. I'm not sure. It's not that much. But we had sent in a sub a while back. I had the regular base version of this card. I sent it in. It was from back in the day opening this product, 2001 Topps, pulling that card. Sent it in for grading. It got a PSA 9, so I just felt it was fitting to at least get this parallel and a PSA 9 as well to go with it. I won this card in auction. It was under $100. I want to say it was around 80, maybe $80 to $85. But in a 10, it's a lot more probably. I would say maybe 200 plus. But still, for a PSA 9 mint card of 2001 of Tomlinson, who's I mean one of the greats, I think, in my opinion.
Great pickup. As far as my flip goes, you can cover your ears if you want, but I finally let go of my 2018 Donruss Optic, Panini Donruss Optic, Messi hollow PSA 10
but not to me.
That I sent in for grading. So I actually got this in a break with Soccer Breakers FC. Shout out to Sai. I got this card in a break. At the time, I want to say the value of the card raw was about $30. It was super clean. Sent it in for grading. I flipped it for $650. So 30 to 650 is a pretty big come up. I know that this card will most likely be worth a lot more in the future, but I have other rare Messi cards that are actually numbered that I'm holding on to long term. I also have some Messi True Rookies. I actually swapped out this PSA 10. I used a little bit of it, of the earnings that I had on it, and I picked up SGC 9. I think it was a 9.5 actually of the same card. So
nice.
I still have a hollow in my possession, so it wasn't that big of a deal to me.
And hopefully I'll get that from you at some point in a trade. As far as my flip of the week goes, it's going to also be a trading into a card that I've wanted for a while. I traded a 2018 Prism World Cup Kylian Mbappe PSA 9, which is a card I didn't really want to get rid of. I know it's going to go up, especially with the World Cup approaching. But I have a 2017 Select Mbappe Field Level PSA 9 that I'm holding long term. But traded this card towards a 2009 Upper Deck Steph Curry PSA 9 Star Rookie card. It's a card I've just been wanting for a while, and it seems like I always passed up on it. Got it in a bigger trade. There's a few other cards involved with our friend Michael Rubin, but this was one of the cards I've really been wanting for a while, so I was happy that he made the deal with me, and he got a card. He's trying to get into soccer more. He got a card that he really wanted. I got a Curry card. I've been wanting a Curry rookie for a while, so, just traded it across, and happy about the deal for sure.
What was the value on that Mbappe?
Mbappe is, I really don't know what a PSA 9 is going for. I know they reached around 400 at one point. I'm sure they're not that at all, but the Curry at the time was around 400 value for a PSA 9. So again, there were other cards in the deal, so even if the Mbappe was, let's say, 300 or whatever, I mean, there's some other cards that worked out in the deal. But again, I mean, it's just getting, as much as I hate getting rid of cards in general, let alone an Mbappe, I mean, you get it into the hands of a friend that's trying to get into soccer, you get a card in an exchange that you've been wanting for a while. So it's just, that's part of, the community. Again, just being able to talk to people and work out those deals.
Right. That's a win-win, dude. I mean, it's great putting cards in people's hands regardless, but knowing that it's somebody that's that's interested in getting more into soccer makes it even better, dude. And it's somebody that we respect and we really like in the hobby. So,
and it's one of the only ways I'm really interested in getting rid of soccer. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, it's nice selling cards, but like when it comes to soccer, there's just so much potential there that, like, if you're going to get rid of it, it's better to at least know the person that's getting it.
So you keep tabs on that bad boy. Buy it back from them
whenever it's
5x.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are our pickups and flips of the week. All right, man. So do you think did a good job of covering the in-person, the card show, local card shop approach. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I just hope people look into it. And like I said, using the easiest resource as far as YouTube or just the internet in general. I mean, either looking up locations or watching videos. That's the best way to go. And just it makes the hobby more fun, because when you focus on just eBay sales and stuff, it's all about just what it's going for, money, everything. Like, and going to shows and at least like learning what people are interested in. Maybe you have something and you're like, why do they want this card? Maybe it's their favorite player, some sentimental value. I mean, you just never know what kind of interactions you might have with people, either at card shows or card shops.
Right. You never know the friends that you could make too by just putting yourself out there and sharing your love and passion for the hobby with somebody else that feels the same way you do, man. There's, in a world that, can sometimes feel isolating or negative, the hobby can really bring a positive to your life and bring positive people into your life. I know we've met a lot of people along the way, even just by starting Raw Mints, December of 2019. We've met so many really cool people within the hobby that we've never even met in person through Instagram, but we're tight with and we talk to. And there's quite a few people that we've interacted with that we, respect and they respect us. And it's just, that's what the hobby is really about, man. That's kind of what this episode, we wanted to get the point across is, yes, there's, the internet is the great connector and it always will be, but there's no connection like in-person, interaction and not even just in person, but just interacting with people in general, not just getting a deal on eBay, but talking to somebody on IG and working out deals that way, or just asking about somebody's PC and why they collect this person. And you never know, just like, you never know if you can inspire somebody to start collecting a certain player or start getting into a different sport that you're in. It's just mutually beneficial, for everybody to have that interaction. And it's good talking to people. It's nice to get out there and connect with people, especially these days. So we really hope that you liked our take or our perspective of, the in-person interaction and what it means to us and sharing our stories that we have. We hope that you can benefit from every episode that we put out in some way, whether it's listening to one of the stories that we have or sharing some of our strategies or tactics that we use within the hobby or covering what's going on in the hobby. That's really our point of this podcast, is to just talk cards and where we think it's going. And we're going to continue to do that with the support of all of you. Thank you again for listening week after week. It means a lot to us. If you haven't already subscribed, please be sure to do that. It really does help us get the word out to more people. So this has been another episode of Wax Talk with Raw Mint. I'm Carlos.
And I'm Bruce.
Thank you for listening.